last week we got it. We were in chapter 3, but we didn't finish it. So I just want to briefly look at a couple things that were in chapter 3 that we looked at already, and that's in verse 12, where we see the second of those 6 statements that talk about what the real answer is. And in this one, he adds something. I'm going to put you to the test. See if you can tell me what was added to this one from the one before. He says, I know nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. There's an important feature that's added to this. I won't make you rack your brains for too long, but the phrase that I'm looking for is to do good. Before he said, nothing's better than to enjoy what God has given us. I'm paraphrasing that, but here he adds, and to do good. It's important that we add that part as well. Just going out and enjoying everything God gave us, you can totally abuse that. But when he adds the do good part, that kind of limits what he's trying to get across. And I guess I just he had been talking about the futility of life. I mean, that's a theme through the whole book. But he talks about, when you die, you're gone. You don't have any more than what you started. Well, he continues on in the 3rd chapter in verse 16. He says, moreover, I saw, where? Under the sun. We're talking about life on earth, not if you just live life on earth, not caring about anything else. Where does that get you? What is life on earth all about? He says, so he's going to say, he's already looked at a couple things. Now he's looking at another one. He says, I saw under the sun, in the place of judgment, wickedness was there. Now that judgment there is not talking about like judgment day or condemnation kind of judgment. It's talking about, like I have written out there, it's the act of deciding a case. Who decides a case? The judges. So he's talking about judges. In his day, can we say the same thing today about our judges? Some are good, but there's also wickedness amongst the judges. In the place of righteousness, iniquity was there. What is righteousness? Honorable, correct? Okay, doing right, being right with God. The opposite is what he talks about here. Iniquity, sin. So righteousness versus sin. In the place where there should be righteousness happening, there's iniquity. That was in David's day, 1000 BC. Has anything changed much? We still have the same thing. So do you think this book applies to us? And it certainly does. So in verse 17, he said, I said in my heart, the center of me, the thinking part, the part where all the decisions are made, I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked. For there is a time for every purpose and for every work. Yeah, that's a here's why. I said God's going to judge the righteous and the wicked, and here's why. Because there's a time for everything, and that includes judgment. And God has pronounced judgment many times during the course of human history, but there's going to be one last judgment, which we all know, the final judgment. There's a time for that. There's a time for God to do it, and part of judgment can also be the the sentence, I guess you would say. So God has pronounced a sentence on people all down through that affect this life. Like, for example, the children of Israel, numerous times when they messed up, what would he do? Send a nation to put them into captivity or to destroy part of their land or whatever. He would send things. So that was a judgment by God. There was a time for that. There was also a time for God to bless the people, which he did. He did greatly when they repented and said, "Oh no, we'll follow you. We'll follow you." He gave them that opportunity. He was very patient, long suffering with them over the course of many centuries. But bottom line, he's saying here, there's a time for that. There will be judgment from time to time. Remember what I didn't put all those slides in this one, but before we looked at the repetition of it. What's been is, what is will be, what will be same as what has been, all that kind of stuff. There's a repetition, and that's the way it works with judgment too. God will judge, things will go better for a while, then we get too confident with ourselves or too complacent and start doing things that opposed to God. So I mean, and I'm talking about as a human history. That's the way it's gone in cycles. History repeats itself. I don't know if some of you remember Cousin Minnie Pearl, and she did a recording where there's music in the background, but she's just quoting, and it's history repeats itself, and she names all this kind of stuff that happened. John Kennedy, his vice president was named Johnson. Lincoln's vice president was named Johnson, and just all this kind of stuff. And she just ends up, history repeats itself. And I heard a joke one time, history repeats itself, repeats itself, repeats itself, going on and on. Anyway, we can expect judgment from time to time if we're not living up to God's standard. God will judge us commensurate with whatever it is, but he's not opposed to hitting you upside the head with a brick when you're messing up to get you to repent. And he's done that to me, and he's done that to a few of us around, and it's a blessing to have that happen, because that's the only way it gets us to wake up. I mean, he did it with David when Nathan said, "You're the guy." That was hitting him upside the head with a brick. Oh man, and he repented after that. So anyway, God's going to judge. Well, he continues then in verse 18. I said in my heart concerning the condition of the sons of men. The sons of men, we've heard that phrase before. And what that is referring to is people, human beings. Okay, so what he's going to do is, I'm looking at the condition of human beings. God tests them that they may see that they themselves are like animals. So he puts us through trials that happen. We see it around us. What is for, so that we can see that we're just like animals. Notice the next word, for. Here's a reason. Here's why I'm saying this. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. He's compared men. Now he's comparing men with animals. He says, as one dies, so dies the other. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over the animals. Here's why. It's all vanity. And it sounds pretty bleak as you look at it, but did he say anything that's not true? Do animals, yeah, life under the sun, there's no, as we've talked about over and over, there's no profit. You don't take anything out of this life. You come into life with nothing, you go out with nothing. Going to make another comparison here pretty soon, but this is under the sun. This is without considering God. Here's how it works. You die, so does your dog. You know, you breathe air. What does your dog breathe? Air, same air you breathe. In fact, you're breathing air that all kinds of animals have already breathed. For those of you that are germaphobes. Anyway, I won't go any further with that one, but he continues on and says, all go to one place. And where's that place? All are from the dust, and all return to dust. This is like we've been talking about with profit. You bring nothing into the world, you take nothing out. Well, here's another comparison. We come from dust, dirt, and that's how we go back. We go back to that. And so he says, who knows the spirit of the sons of men? Now he's talking a spiritual thing. As far as life on earth goes, who can possibly know what happens to your spirit? Do you ever see anything go when somebody dies? You see it? No, but it's not there anymore. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the animal, which goes down to the earth? That's a well, the spirit that they have returns to the earth. So that puts a damper on people that think there's a doggy heaven, that they go up. They're just animals. They live and breathe here. They do what their instinct tells them to do. When they die, it's over. Their spirit goes to the dust. You can love them, you can enjoy them while you have them, but don't expect to see them in heaven. That's not how that works. So he says in verse 22, so this is a kind of a conclusion. So I perceived that, and here's the third of the 6 such statements. I perceived that nothing is better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his heritage. And what is heritage? It's inheritance. It's what God gives us. And notice it says to rejoice in whose works? Somebody else's work? Rejoice in your own works. We're supposed to earn our own keep, so to speak. And it's okay. In fact, we're supposed to rejoice in that and enjoy it, because that's what God gives us. It gives us the ability to function in this life, and he expects us to use our ability to the best of our ability. And then he says another, here's why. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? Here's why nothing's better than to enjoy what you have while you have it. Rejoice in your own works. And it's because you have no idea what's going to happen after you, or what's going to happen to your works, everything that you do. If you don't enjoy the fruit of your works, who's going to? You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen to it. You may think you know, but how many people have died and then there's been terrible lawsuits, and that book Bleak House by Charles Dickens, it's about an inheritance that these 2 kids are supposed to receive, but it goes into the courts, and it takes so long for them to do it, all the money's gone to the lawyers by the time by the time the case is settled and they end up with nothing. That's the kind of thing you don't know what's going to happen after it. And so here's what you do. You enjoy it. Enjoy your own works. That's your heritage. That's what God has given to you. Why fret about the future? You don't have any control of it. You don't know what's going to happen. Just enjoy it while you have it. That's what this book is about. So now we go to chapter 4. Anybody have any other questions or comments about chapter 3 before we go on? Okay, so chapter 4, he says, then I returned. What does returning mean? Going back to where you started from. I returned and considered all the oppression that's done under the sun. So he's going back to the starting point. He does this over and over again. First, I tried to go through power. I tried to go through love, relationship with women. I tried wine. Now he's going back and returning. Now I'm going to look at oppression that's happening under the sun. He says, and look, the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter. On the side of the oppressors, there is power, but they have no comforter. Note the they there, at first when you read it, you think, what do you mean that the oppressors have no comforter? No, he's throwing it back up to what he'd already said about the comforter, comforter. The oppressors have power. They don't need the comforter. They're in control of it. They use their money or whatever, however they want to do it, and they stomp all over people in order to get money or to keep money. They oppress people. They oppress the poor mostly. And those people have no comfort. There's nobody to help them. That's the way it is in this life. Is this still happening? Is there people making a living off of everybody else? That happens all the time. You hear all these Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes and all this kind of stuff, where people get themselves into trouble. They become oppressed because there's somebody doing the oppressing, figuring out ways to step on people in order to get their money. So anyway, that's how it is in this life. That's how it is under the sun. Notice he repeated under the sun again. How many times he keeps saying under the sun? This is how it works on earth, amongst people here on earth. He says, therefore, and this is pretty sad. He says, therefore, I praised or commended the dead who were already dead. You guys got it the best, more than the living who are still alive. You guys have a better condition than we have who are still alive. And here's why. He says, well, he adds one more thing. He says in verse 3, yet better than both the living and the dead, better than both of them is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that's done under the sun. Now that makes life sound like, he's just saying it's better to never have been born. Under the sun, you could say that, because what happens under the sun? Evil work happens, and it affects you. You have a lot of troubles and trials in this life. If you're never born, do you have all these trouble and trials? No. Do you have all the good? No. But at least you don't have the troubles and trials. So he's saying the guy that's never been born, a stillborn baby, or somebody that's never even conceived, they have it better than anybody that's living and has died, or anybody that's living now, because they never had to go through all the junk stuff. Well, that's fatalistic and depressing to sound like, but if you don't understand how to live this life under the sun, that's how it is. And that's how you people conduct their life. That's how they think. How many people have you ever heard say, I wish I was dead, or I wish I'd never been born? Well, that's the kind of thing that he's talking about right here. Feel free to speak up and say comments if you want anytime along the way here. But then he said in verse 4, again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work, a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. And so somebody is industrious, does a lot of things, builds a nice house, works hard, buys a nice car, uh, sends his kids to good schools and all that kind of stuff by working and laboring to get all this stuff. He's envied by his neighbor. The old thing that we think about, trying to keep up with the neighbors type of thing.
Isn't that one of them? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. Life on earth, that's how it works, is people always wish they had what the guy next door has. Your neighbors, we envy that. Does that get you anywhere? Does that get you profit in this life? No. You can envy all you want, but it's not going to get you anywhere. It's grasping for the wind. God has given such and such to this person, didn't give it to you. You're grasping at the wind to try to think you should have it. So he's just adding another thing here. This looking at what the other guy has, what your neighbor has, and wishing you had it, envying him for it. And usually envy is connected with a good attitude or a bad. Usually with a bad. When you start being envious, what do? You either try to get what they have, however you can get it, or at the very least, you try to make their life worse because you want them to be you want to be on equal stand with them. So envy is not a good thing. It doesn't get you anywhere. There's no profit in it. It's vain. It's grasping for the wind. Then he says another thing. He's going to say three things. There's going to be two extremes and then a middle thing. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. What does that phrase mean? Doesn't try. He just sits there and eventually he dies because his body ends up feeding off of itself until there's nothing left and he dies. That's the fool that does that. It's stupid to just sit there and let yourself die. He says, better is a handful with quietness than both hands full together with toil and grasping for the wind. So he mentions three things. One is the fool that doesn't do anything. Then the other one is he's got both hands full with all this toil and work that he's doing, but does it get him anywhere? He's not enjoying it because he's just working to get it. The middle ground is better is a handful, just a little bit, just a handful with quietness, and implying what he's already said three times before, enjoy what you have while you have it. That's better than having two hands full and just be working all the time and not enjoying what you have. So he's comparing those three extremes. And that happens here on this earth too. There's people that don't want to do anything and they end up consuming themselves. And there's also people that try to get their hands full, get as much as they can, but they're working all the time and they don't enjoy what they have. They don't get the good out of it that God intended for them to get. So the happy person is the one that's in the middle. He's got what he needs, got a handful, and he's just living quietly and in peace and enjoying what he's got. And that's the better thing to do. I keep noticing stuff that we talked about in Hebrews. What does that word better mean? Or what does it refer to? What do we say in Hebrews? It's one of those comparison words where you're comparing something with something else. That's one of the things I had you underline was comparisons better. And then we've seen 4 many times so far in this, but we've seen better a few times as well. I just wanted to point it out that it's not just Hebrews that has that kind of stuff in it. Well, then in verse 7, he says, then I returned. So what is he doing? Going back to the beginning. I'm starting over with another kind of search or another kind of exploration. And I saw vanity under the sun. Had you seen vanity under the sun before already? Yeah. And here's what I'm talking about. Another thing that's vanity under the sun, is vain, is empty. He says, there is one alone, without companion. He has neither son nor brother, no relatives, in other words. Yet there is no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? Never asked that question. This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. Literally, that grave misfortune means a miserable occupation. It's not a good life. It's not a way to occupy yourself by just going after everything that you can get and not enjoying it. You don't have anybody to give it to. I mean, he's talking here specifically about somebody that doesn't have any one to inherit what he's managed to mount up. But that's really ridiculous. I mean, like he says, that's a grave misfortune. That's totally missing the boat of life here on this earth, is to just be a workaholic and not enjoy what you have when there's nobody else to give it to. You end up giving it to the government or whatever. You probably don't know what happens to it. You just die with all this stuff. How many times have you heard about an old person dying in their home and they go in and find all this money and stuff that they've been hoarding all their, collecting and putting a little bit in this Bible, this in this book, finding a ton of money. What good did it do them? They deprived themselves of good. They lived a miserly life or a very, very humble life when they had all this money that they could have been enjoying stuff with it. That's a grave misfortune. That's life on earth. Now he says he's going to make another comparison. Notice the word better. 2 are better than 1. And here's why. Because they have a good reward or a good payout or a good return for their labor. And here's why. If they fall, one will lift up the companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Sue's dad fell off the roof of a house. He was a work construction. Fell off the roof of a house and he landed in cement. Did he? Or
Well, he was holding a cement hose and it went in his face.
oh, okay. And then he fell off the roof. Well, he obviously needed somebody to pick him up. If he'd been by himself, who knows what would have happened. Anyway, it's what he's going to get at. It's like on the bottom here. Life is meant to be lived in community. We're not meant to live alone. 2 are better than 1 because 1 can help the other one up if he falls down. And again, if 2 lie down together, they'll keep warm. Now, we don't do that much anymore, do we? Seems kind of funky if, the way that we think. Of course, we have means of heating. And so if two men lie down together, it's usually not to keep warm. But back then, you're out, whatever, you're out on a trip someplace and you have to camp. You try to get near the fire, but if it's really cold, it's like that music group 3 Dog Night, and we're referring to up in Alaska, where if it's really cold, you put 3 dogs in the tent or in the igloo with you to help keep you warm. So a 3-dog night is a really cold one. Well, this is the idea he's talking about, but what he's getting at is it's better, 2 people are better than 1. He says, though one may be overpowered by another, here's another comparison, though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him. So here's another reason why 2 is better than 1, is because if a guy tries to rob you, if you got a buddy, you can overpower this guy and not let him take your money. But then he adds another thing in here. He says, and a 3-fold cord is not quickly broken. So if 2 are better than 1, what about 3? It's even better yet. I mean, and he's using a cord here. In this one, a rope. You know, we don't make many ropes today, but back then they made their own ropes, and they would take a strand, 2 strands, and weave them together, and it was stronger than 1. But to put 3 together, that's a lot stronger. And so, but what he's getting at, and he doesn't keep going and saying 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, he's getting at the fact that the more the merrier, or the more the better. And there's strength in numbers, as I wrote it out to the side there, not just physical strength, but emotional and spiritual, all that. There's strength in numbers. That's why we're told in Hebrews to not forsake the assembling of ourselves together. We need each other. We need that community. And that was said by Solomon 960 years before Christ. So that's always been true. That's the way God intended life to be, for us to be in community. First community is family. Husband and wife, that's a small community. And then they have children, the community gets bigger. But the second level is a town, or a neighborhood, then a town, then a nation. But that's how life on earth is meant to be lived, is in community. Then he says, verse 13, another comparison, better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. Now he's thinking probably about himself, or maybe of his father David. A poor and wise youth. Now was Solomon? Well, let's look. Just take David for example, because we know more about his youth. Was he poor when he started? Yeah, he was a shepherd. But was he reasonably wise as a youth? Yeah, he was. You learn about his life. He knew enough. He knew how to fight with a lion or a bear. So I've killed both. And then he was wise enough to know how to kill Goliath. But he was wise as a young man. He says, for here he comes out of prison to be king. Now, he's just using the most extreme example of low life, is coming out of prison to become a king, going from one extreme to the other. And so although he was born poor in his kingdom, he says about this young person, probably talking about himself, becoming a king as a young man and gaining all this riches and everything. But he says, I saw that all the living who walk under the sun, here it is, life on earth again, they were with the second youth who stands in his place. So you have a youth that becomes king. Is he replacing somebody? Yeah, and usually it's an old guy. The king gets old and dies, and then his successor takes his place, a young guy. But he says, all the people, all the living, who do they go after? The new young guy. And the old guy gets pushed away to the side. This youth, this young guy, there's nobody to stand in his place. I put it out to the side there. The crowd follows the new and the young, but here's what happens after that. There's no end of all the people over whom he was made a king. Yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Yeah, it's cyclical. It happens over and it happened with David and Solomon. Uh, Solomon took over, young guy, everybody, yeah, let's go after Solomon. And then David kind of by the wayside. Then with Solomon, young, everything, everybody's after him. But then after a while, what happened? People, he gets older. Notice he starts off by saying a foolish king who will be admonished no more. What does that mean? It means you can't tell them anything. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and you can't tell me any different. That kind of thing. That's how a lot of kings became, and they became a little bit more oppressive than they were at the beginning. Not worrying about being so friendly to the people, that sort of thing. So the people turn and want to follow the new guy coming in. But he says those that come after will not rejoice in him. So starts off young, you get old, the new guy replaces you, people don't remember you. They're chasing after the new guy. And it's a cycle that happens with and he's talking specifically here about kings and the young person that takes their place. It's just a cycle over and over. This is how people are on life on earth. The crowd follows the new young guy. And that's going to happen in our country, probably sooner than later. Some of these young people coming up are going to have the majority, and everybody's going to flock to these young people until they find out that they don't know any more than the old people, and they'll start losing interest in them too and find somebody else to follow after.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the way it is. This young guy coming in as king, he knows less than the king, but that's how people think here on this earth. And what is it? Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. If you're trying to find out the meaning of life in this, you're grasping for the wind. It's vanity, it's vain, you can't do it. You're not going to find the answer there. So this brings us to the end of chapter 4. So we're going to stop here and get into chapter 5 next week. So any questions or comments? If not, thank you for attention, and we'll be ready for worship in about 18 minutes.